Welcome to the Sky Commander Flight Brief. It's your mission-ready podcast for drone pilot training and aerial insights across Canada.
From Transport Canada rules to real-world drone ops, we break it down, take you higher, and help you earn your wings. Because here at skycommander.ca, we don't just fly.
It hints there's more to it. It's a masterclass, a deeper level, maybe a philosophy or a community focus, perhaps.
It's definitely intriguing, sets them apart from just, a basic tips show. Skycommander.ca is the obvious next step. Precisely. If you're thinking about flying a drone in Canada, boom, this content is aimed right at you.
Powered by skycommander.ca.
The elite podcast for Canada's drone pilot. Okay, let's get started.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a fantastic stack of sources here, all about something absolutely crucial for anyone flying a drone in Canada, RPAS site assessment.
RPAS, yeah, remotely piloted aircraft system.
Right. And it really is the core, isn't it? It's not just some bureaucratic step you tick off.
Not at all. It is fundamentally about mission safety and, frankly, making sure you're flying legally and responsibly. It's foundational.
Exactly. We've got everything here. Transport Canada rules, guidance docs like TP 15263, some really eye-opening real-world case studies.
And even some, surprising Canadian trivia about drones and airspace, which is kind of fun.
It is. So our mission for this deep dive is to take all this material, pull out the most important nuggets, maybe highlight some surprises.
And give you a really clear picture of what it actually means to be an expert at assessing a site before you launch in Canada today.
Yeah, get you up to speed quickly and properly.
So whether you're just flying for fun, maybe starting a drone business, or you're already an advanced certified pilot.
Understanding site assessment deeply is, it's non-negotiable.
Totally. We're going to cover the absolute must-know rules, point out some of those hidden risks people often miss,
and track how the regulators' expectations have really shifted over the last few years. It's quite a change.
It really is. So what does this all mean for you listening?
It means getting informed, properly informed, with maybe just enough personality to make it stick. Let's dive in.
Let's. As we dug into these sources, one of the most striking things is just how much this whole process has changed in Canada. And pretty quickly, too.
Right. There's been a real evolution. It definitely wasn't always this rigorous. Remember back in 2019 when Part 9X of the cars rolled out?
Mm-hmm. The big drone regulation update.
Yeah. Site assessment was introduced then, but the language was, pretty broad, maybe a bit vague.
It was. And a lot of pilots did it informally, A quick visual scan, maybe some mental notes. Documentation wasn't really spelled out as required for basic ops.
But that changed pretty fast.
It really did. The sources show that between, say, 2020 and 2022, Transport Canada started looking closely at drone incidents.
And they found a pattern.
They did. Repeatedly, poor site assessments were a major contributing factor. So the regulators started expecting more rigor, especially from advanced certificate holders, ones flying near people or in controlled airspace.
And tools like NAV Drone, that's Transport Canada's official app, right, for airspace checks.
Exactly. That and checking NOTAMs, those are the notices to airmen, about temporary restrictions. They started shifting from just being a good idea to more like best practice.
Okay, then 2023 brought a big update. TP 15263, the Knowledge Requirements Guide.
It's a study guide for the exams, yeah.
It was revised, and it got much more specific. It actually listed out what must be in a proper site assessment.
And really emphasized documentation, particularly for advanced ops, or if you're flying under an SFOC, that's a Special Flight Operations Certificate for complex stuff.
Right, and NAV Drone, NOTAMs, they were listed as essential tools now.
Yeah.
Not optional.
It's essential, not optional. That was the shift.
And looking ahead towards 2025, especially with the SOR 2025-70 amendments coming.
The trend is clear. It's becoming formalized in the enforcement culture. The sources describe this definite shift from you probably should do this to you absolutely must do this.
Particularly if you're flying near people, in controlled airspace or busy urban areas.
Exactly. Using digital tools isn't just best practice anymore. It's standard professional practice. And here's the kicker. There's a real negligence risk now if something goes wrong and you don't have a documented assessment.
Okay, so boiling this whole evolution down, the sources kind of frame it with this really interesting idea. From see to prove.
That nails it. Before, if something went wrong, maybe you could tell an investigator, yeah, I looked around, it seemed clear. The expectation was mostly visual.
But now that's just not enough.
Not even close. Now you need to be able to prove it.
Yeah.
You need to show how you assessed the site, what tools did you use, what did you actually look at.
And what hazards you found.
Exactly. What specific hazards, and not just the obvious ones sticking out of the ground. And maybe most critically, you need to show what you did about those hazards, your mitigation steps.
It's about demonstrating your diligence, not just saying you're careful.
Precisely. It's a fundamental difference.
So the crucial takeaway here, especially if you're an advanced RPAS pilot flying in trickier spots.
Yeah, those informal, undocumented visual scans, they're outdated and risky.
Documentation isn't just a nice to have, it's expected. You basically have to document your assessment or you're exposed if there's an incident or an audit.
Absolutely. You risk it if you don't. And moving from that history to what really sets the experts apart today, it's clear they approach site assessment totally differently.
Right. It's not just another item on the pre-flight checklist to them.
No, it's the foundation of their whole safety system for that mission.
The sources make that distinction clearly. Beginners see it as a task, maybe a chore. Experts see it as a risk control system.
Exactly. It's about proactively managing anything that could go wrong.
And that involves using analytical models, even if informally.
Yeah, things like bow tie analysis, thinking about threats, controls, consequences, or hazard ID models like PAVE, pilot, aircraft, environment, external pressures. Considering all those factors, experts might use severity versus likelihood thinking, too, to figure out how much effort to put into mitigating a specific risk.
So it's a structured way of thinking, not just looking around. And a huge part of that expert knowledge is really understanding the whole airspace ecosystem. Right?
Yeah, definitely. The sources hammer this home. NAV drone is great, it's essential, but it's just one tool.
You need more fluency than just checking the app.
Way more. Experts can actually read and interpret VNC's visual navigation charts. They understand the Designated Airspace Handbook, the DAH for Special Use Airspace.
Knowing the difference between advisory and restricted Class F airspace, decoding altitudes, AGL versus ASL.
Exactly. And understanding the role of ATC and flight information centers, even if you don't need to talk to them directly for your specific flight. Knowing who manages the airspace nearby adds a layer of awareness.
And here's where that cool trivia comes in, connecting to Canada's aviation history.
Yeah. Alouette, Canada was the third country in the world with a satellite way back in '62.
That's amazing. I didn't know that.
It's pretty neat. And the connection is, when you use tools like NAV Drone today, you're tapping into airspace data built on decades of Canadian aerospace expertise, including that pioneering satellite work that helped map our huge country.
So the digital tools stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak.
You could say that. It grounds the tech in a pretty cool legacy.
Okay, so experts analyze deeply, understand airspace broadly, but what specifically are they looking for? What of the assessment?
Right, identifying the hazards, both the obvious ones and crucially the ones that are maybe invisible or dynamic.
The sources had some mnemonics for this, like Tom.
Yeah, Tom. Terrain, obstacles, man-made and environmental hazards, or site fit.
Surroundings, intrusions, traffic emergencies. If it adds structures, intrusions, terrain, emergencies, flight path, info tools, takeoff landing zones.
They're good memory aids, help ensure you cover the bases. But the core elements come from TP 15263 and CR's 901.27. You have to evaluate the terrain.
Hills, valleys, elevation changes, things that affect your flight path, or your ability to see the drone VLOS.
Visual line of sight, yeah. Obstacles are massive. Trees, towers, power lines, buildings, cranes. You need their location, their height.
And this brings up that case study, the construction crane collision in Toronto 2018.
A powerful one. Certified pilot, but they failed to account for the crane's swing radius in their assessment.
So the drone hit the crane.
Hit the crane, crashed, narrowly missed workers below apparently, really reinforced CAR's 901.27 about incomplete site surveys.
And there was another lesson there too, right? About the drone's settings.
Yes. The return to home altitude, the RTH, was set too low, below the crane's height. So if it lost signal, it would have flown right into it anyway.
Wow. So you have to plan for dynamic hazards and ensure your safety settings match the site risks.
Absolutely. And there's that related obscure rule the sources mention. You're accountable for the airspace all the way up, ground to 400 feet, typically.
Which includes temporary stuff, like wires, flags, even a Canada Day flagpole.
Exactly. You got to look up, not just around. Then there's weather and environment. Wind, visibility, ceilings, fog, temperature.
But not just surface wind. Right.
No, you have to consider wind gradient, how it increases with height and turbulence. Especially near buildings or terrain, it can be way worse up high.
Might need an anemometer or check the drone's own sensors.
Definitely. Airspace classification is a must-check. Controlled, restricted, near aerodromes. Use NAV drone and VNCs.
And NOTAMs. Non-negotiable, those temporary restrictions.
Can't miss those. Air shows, firefighting VIP movements, they pop up.
Which leads to that other case study, the Montreal NAV drone miss in 2021.
Right. Pilot used NAV drone, got the authorization, but missed an active NOTAM for a nearby helicopter filming operation.
Drone got too close.
Yep. Cited for inadequate NOTAM review, the lesson. You must check NAV drone and NOTAM separately using an official source like NEBI Canada's portal.
Dual checking, mandatory. Relying on just one tool is a trap.
Big time. Then there's people and property. Huge consideration.
And non-participant is defined really broadly, isn't it?
Very. Anyone potentially affected. People in cars, in nearby buildings, even shoppers behind glass windows near where you're flying.
And you have to know the proximity rules, 5 meters, 30 meters, depending on your setup.
And the public events rule CARS 901 1.412b. Absolutely no flying over or near advertised public events without that specific SFOC permit.
Because crowds are just too unpredictable.
Exactly. And there's the Winnipeg Festival flyover case from 2019.
Flew over a music festival without an SFOC, got caught, fined $3,000.
Yep. Lesson. Research local events, assess crowd risk before you show up.
And that connects to the trivia about the first drone arrest in Canada, Quebec City, 2017.
Right. Flying over a stadium, another stark example used in training now, shows the serious side.
Crucial point, too. Landowner permission doesn't override these rules, does it?
Not at all. You can't skip airspace checks, people proximity assessment, or the site survey just because you have land access. Airspace is public. Safety rules apply everywhere.
And that links to privacy. The Suburban Ontario case study from 2019.
Yeah, the roof inspection flight that inadvertently spooked a pool party next door.
Even though the flight path itself was legal regarding structures.
Technically, yes. But it triggered a privacy complaint. The takeaway was that pilots should factor in privacy optics and potential intrusion during site assessment, especially in residential areas.
So another sort of obscure rule. Liability for perceived privacy intrusion exists, even if unintentional. You need to consider it.
Transport Canada expects it now. Consulting the Privacy Commissioner's guidance is a good idea.
The prohibited restricted zones, airports, prisons, military areas, check NAV drone and VNCs.
And don't forget local bylaws. Municipalities can have their own no-fly zones that might add restrictions.
Like Banff National Park, that trivia nugget, a definite no-drone zone without prior Parks Canada permission.
And hefty fines, up to $25,000. Plus potential wildlife fines like spooking caribou can cost you $2 calories under the Wildlife Act. You can't disturb wildlife with drones.
Which brings up the wild encounter case in BC 2022, spooking a grizzly bear.
Exactly. Pilot checked airspace but missed the environmental wildlife risk for that specific spot. Site assessment includes wildlife risk, check Environment Canada, Parks Canada resources.
Okay, so those are hazards you can mostly spot or find on a map. What about the invisible ones the sources mentioned, the trickier stuff?
Ah, yes. The stuff that doesn't show up easily. Wi-Fi interference in cities, electromagnetic interference, EMI near substations, power lines, broadcast towers.
That can mess with GPS, telemetry, control signals.
Absolutely. Transport Canada expects you to assess for frequency interference risk. Rule of thumb. Drone acts weird near a tower. Land immediately.
And there was the power line close call case study in Alberta 2020.
Right. Pilot used NAV drone after a storm, didn't walk the whole site, grazed a temporary power pole put up for repairs, wasn't on any map.
Violation of CARS 901.33, unsafe operation.
Crucial lesson. Verify obstacles visually and digitally, especially temporary stuff or after weather events.
Yeah.
Site walks are often essential.
Other invisible risks. Bird flocks, migratory routes.
Yep. Sun position causing glare during takeoff or landing, wind shear near buildings, or terrain, that sudden nasty turbulence.
So identifying hazards is more than just listing things. It's actively looking for what you can't see easily and understanding the why behind the risk.
Exactly. It's about anticipating.
That's a lot to cover in the what. Let's shift to the how. How do experts actually do this comprehensive assessment? Turn info into a plan.
It's definitely a process. Start digital. NAV drone for airspace, restrictions, maybe initial clearances. Critically, check NOTAMs separately, NAV Canada portal, consult the DAH for special use airspace details, review VNC charts for terrain, towers, boundaries.
Then move to the physical site.
Yes, walk the perimeter if you can, or use detailed aerial imagery. Identify all those hazards, visible, dynamic, invisible, like EMI sources, and document them.
And then the mitigation plan for each hazard.
That's the key step. What are you going to do about each risk? Adjust the flight path, use terrain observers, limit altitude, set up barriers, choose a different time.
And it needs to be a dynamic mitigation strategy, right? Conditions change.
The sources stress that. Build contingency plans before you fly. What if wind picks up? Unexpected helicopter, lose sight of the drone.
Need pre-planned actions.
Like preset safe landing spots away from the launch point, using real-time telemetry.
Yeah.
And relying on trained observers.
Trained observers are key. And that trivia about Canada helping standardize the VLOS rule globally.
Right. And the rule is they must be properly briefed or trained for that specific flight, not just anyone standing around. An untrained spotter can actually invalidate your flight legally.
Good point. Another expert technique, simulating the site beforehand.
Yeah, using tools like Google Earth Pro to scout terrain, obstacles, LZs, SunCalc for lighting and shadows, weather models for gust patterns, satellite or LiDAR if available, saves time, helps you arrive with a strategy.
And the core mindset, acting as flight captain.
Yes, you're responsible for the whole operation, everyone involved. Brief your crew, use checklists, tailboard talks like pro aviators, assign emergency roles, model crew resource management CRM, even solo or with one observer.
Run through what-if scenarios like real pilots do.
You should. And that other trivia nugget, Canadian drone pilots are legally termed aircrew.
Aircrew. That really frames the responsibility, doesn't it?
It does. Pre-flight, in-flight, post-flight duties. Site survey is mandatory. You are captain of the skies for your operation from the ground.
Okay, responsibility leads us to documentation and compliance. The sources are crystal clear. Records matter. Hugely.
They really are. Like we said, it's basically a legal requirement now for advanced ops, trends, TIPI 15263 updates. It all points to needing proof.
So what needs to be in that record?
Minimum. Location, date, time, pilot observer names, all identified hazards, and crucially, how each was mitigated. Evidence you used, assessment tools, NAV drones, screenshots, NOTAM checks confirmed, VNCs reviewed.
And flight parameters confirmed during assessment.
Yes. Your planned RTH altitude. Takeoff landing zones, max altitude for the mission showing they align with your assessment.
Because if Transport Canada audits you, this documented record is what they'll demand to see if you met the CAR's 901.27 site survey requirement.
Exactly. It's your proof of due diligence. And another obscure but vital rule, keep these records for at least 12 months under CARs.
And not having a log, or a really poor one, is non-compliance itself, even if nothing went wrong.
That's what the sources indicate. The record itself is part of compliance.
So using a checklist or framework like SiteFit or SmartSafe helps ensure consistency.
Definitely helps make sure you hit all the points and document them reliably every single time.
And that other obscure rule about RT altitude being tied to the documentation.
Right. Your return to home altitude must be assessed and set high enough to clear the tallest obstacle between your operating area and home point. If your RTH is lower than an obstacle you found, your assessment missed a critical mitigation. It's deficient. Document your checked RTH setting.
It's about knowing the why behind the rules, too, not just following checklists.
Absolutely. Experts know the laws, TP 15263, shares Part 9, SOR amendments, but also their intent. Why does this rule exist? Helps with edge cases, explaining decisions, writing good SOPs, training others. Monitor the Canada Gazette for changes.
The key regulations for site assessment again, Shire's 901.27.
Site survey is mandatory before commencing operations, non-negotiable.
Shire's 901.33.
Operate safely. Site assessment proves you considered and mitigated risks to meet that.
And TP 15263, Section 2.2.
Know what's in an assessment and how to apply it. And reviewing those case studies really drives it home. Construction crane, 901.27 RTH, festival flyover, 901.41 public events, power line, 901.33 unsafe ops, temporary obstacles, wild encounter, wildlife risk, NAV drone miss, NOTAMs, privacy complaint, privacy risk assessment.
The sources suggest playing that what if you're the pilot game with these cases. Good learning tool.
Definitely. Ask yourself, what would I do differently? Could tools have helped? Observer needed. What would I log? Builds critical thinking before you need it.
And the consequences for getting site assessment wrong, they're serious.
Very. Regulatory violations, Fines up to $5K for individuals, losing your RPS certificate like the crane pilot, insurance potentially voided, even criminal charges if people or aircraft are endangered like that Quebec City arrest showed.
The stakes are genuinely high. This isn't just paperwork.
Not at all. It's foundational to operating legally and safely.
So how do pilots stay sharp, maintain this expert mindset, anticipate all these varied risks over time?
Continuous learning. Experts don't just learn from their own mistakes, they learn from others. Review incident reports, near-miss summaries from Transport Canada. Look for patterns, RTH issues, weather, NOTAMs.
Use Transport Canada safety bulletins, join forums.
Stay aware, engage with the community, keep learning.
It's about humility, knowing there's always more to learn, right?
Exactly, and the sources list those pro skills again. Dynamic risk assessment on site, fluency with DH NOTAMs, customizing tech like RTH, making defensible decisions, running proper briefings, producing compliant documentation efficiently, anticipating invisible risks, using all the tools together.
That's the mark of someone taking their aircrew responsibility seriously. And one final obscure rule about staying sharp: site assessment validity.
Generally equals a single flight. This trips people up.
Meaning you need to reassess before each flight.
Unless you have a specific, documented, approved multi-flight procedure, yes. I flew here 10 minutes ago. Doesn't cut it. If conditions change, wind, obstacles, people moving in, new flight, new check against your assessment.
Wow. Site assessment validity, single flight. That hammers home the need for constant vigilance.
It's the core of being proactive aircrew.
Well, this has been a really comprehensive deep dive into RPAS site assessment in Canada.
It truly has. We've hit the evolution from seeing to proving, the expert mindset, the hazards visible and invisible, the how-to of assessment, the absolute need for documentation, the rules, consequences, and staying sharp.
The key message seems crystal clear. Site assessment is non-negotiable for safe, legal drone ops in Canada, especially now.
It's a whole process: obstacles, airspace, invisible hazards, people, privacy, dynamic conditions.
It requires the right tools used together, diligent documentation as a legal responsibility, and that aircrew mindset for every single flight.
And it's not just about compliance checks, it's about professionalism, real safety, contributing positively to aviation safety here in Canada.
So here's that final thought for you, the listener, to chew on based on all this. Think about your site assessment process right now. Is it still just a quick visual scan, some mental notes?
Or are you consistently performing a documented dynamic risk assessment for every single flight, covering all potential hazards, seen and unseen, near and far?
Are you truly acting as aircrew, ready to prove your safety diligence?
Maybe review your checklists against what we discussed. Explore some of those tools or documents if they're new to you. Mastering site assessment really is your best tool for safe, successful flights.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Stay safe out there.
That's a wrap on today's mission, Commander. See above, go beyond, get ahead. For more training, tools, and intel, head to skycommander.ca. If you learned something new, share it, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star debrief.